there, loves. Today we're going to be interviewing a colleague and good friend of mine, Graham Bulock, who tells his story about how yoga changed his life. What led you to becoming a yoga teacher?
To becoming a teacher, well,
Yoga teacher.
I had an experience where yoga helped me to heal a lot. So once I got really connected to learning the importance of between the connection between the body and the spirit and the mind and the breath, it really became a pretty clear path that got laid out in front of me. I started out in training to become a personal trainer, and I just had opportunity to expand on that and go through a yoga teacher training at the same time. And I've been using yoga as a means of healing and connecting and quieting the mind, and already kind of in on that path to helping people heal and reshape their bodies and their perspective and attitude. And it just seemed like a clear path. It had been such a strong part of my own practice for a good amount of time that I essentially started as a way to have more tools to be more effective, have a wider demographic of people, to services to offer and things like that. And after, what ended up happening is it really kind of segued into me the becoming the biggest part of my practice, or my means of service and helping people heal. So
Mm-hmm. That's great. And how long have you been practicing yoga for?
I guess I've been practicing yoga for maybe consistently just under 10 years.
Wow.
About 10 years. Yeah, it's what, like I said, when I started, it was basically for physical rehabilitation. So it became a consistent practice for me about that time.
Okay. And how long have you been teaching yoga for?
I've been teaching yoga for almost 3 years in some kind of official capacity, I guess you could say.
Official, certified
Official, yeah.
capacity.
Yeah.
And then where did you go for your yoga teacher trainings?
I went through a yoga teacher cert at Miramar College, San Diego.
Okay. And then what styles or areas of yoga are you drawn to the most? Not just asana practice, but other aspects of yoga.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously I love a good asana practice, but my life has dictated that karma yoga probably is the most important form of practice, after getting a taste of what kind of, you know, karmic rewards, I suppose you could say, that brings into life. It's just become more of a lifestyle than focusing on like a different type of yoga practice. It just becomes kind of second nature to gain the benefits of being of service and giving freely and doing things with intention, you know.
So that's the one you're drawn to naturally the most.
It's the one that I'm drawn to naturally. It's had the most impact in shaping my present moment, you know.
Wonderful. And then have you experienced any changes that fellow teachers have made to yoga that you don't particularly agree with, and why?
I suppose that I think there's a big culture, especially in the area that I did my teacher training in Southern California. There's a big culture of like this workout power yoga, and I'm not necessarily opposed to that in and of itself, but I don't think it's the same in nature or in spirit as there's not a philosophical approach to yoga, which is really an important, obviously the most important part of it, or an important part of it that gets overlooked in Western culture a lot. It's not a stretch class, it's not a movement class, you
Right.
know. It's connection, meditation, it's an experience that is lacking in some of the broader
Right.
teachings. When you try to make it have more of an appeal to the masses or to the fitness crowd, or it kind of loses something. Not that there's not value in movement and stretching. That's great, but it's not exactly yoga just because you're doing some similar poses that take place in an asana practice.
Right. It loses its luster when you turn it into just strictly physical practice.
Sure, there's a whole belief system that needs to be aligned with the movement and meditation of a practice. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's getting neglected. It's turning into an industry instead of
it's like a fad instead of a lifestyle.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's something that kind of brought me to creating this channel, was to shed light on the fact that we're kind of diluting the practice by turning it into a profit machine.
Right. And I think it's really important. And you see this happen in all areas, in all things. Everything kind of is in this world. Everything has an opportunity to be kind of tarnished or tainted from its origin. And that's not to say that things can't change and there's not one better or worse, but when you call it yoga, there has to be a belief system in place, and a lifestyle. And most people don't understand what the yamas and the niyamas even are. They've never heard that term. They've been practicing yoga for years.
Right. Yeah. There was a post I just recently reposted from another yoga teacher. She was talking about the overuse of namaste and how people use it, and people don't really understand its actual interpretation, and that it's actually a greeting. It's not a way to close a class.
Right. It's not an amen. And there's so much value in understanding the why when you're doing anything.
Right.
You lack the ability to approach an asana class with the full intention of a reconnection experience, because it's just like, I'm going to go do my kind of workout.
Yeah. It turns into, why am I trying to get fit and healthy? What's the point?
Right.
Why? Okay, so the next question I have is, how have you noticed any cultural appropriation?
Well, we kind of just touched on that. That's a big part of it for sure.
We see a lot of people who go and buy the deities, the Hindu deities or Buddhas, right?
Yeah.
And they use them as decoration or home decor, and not realize that these are actual spiritual items that people use and have used for thousands of years. And we're just kind of turning them into like something pretty to look at, instead of explaining to people, no, this is Lord Shiva. He's known as the person who brought us yoga.
Sure. And there's
showing gratitude.
there's a fine line between wanting to learn more and understand more and integrate a certain culture into your lifestyle, and appropriation, because I'm guilty of this too. I've got tattoos on me that I got before I fully understood what they meant. But
we're all hypocrites in some way.
Of course. But thank goodness that those types of things have helped to steer me down the path of wanting to understand deeper and wanting to connect with those things, because there's a connection with them off the gate that attracts. But that's only half the battle. You got to find the path and then fully immerse yourself in understanding what it is that you're doing and supporting and living.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then the next question that I have is, what are some of the things that we can do as yoga teachers to prevent cultural appropriation?
I think that being traditional way of thinking and practices, it's always fun to get creative, but I'm always afraid to take too many liberties. Well, for myself, especially having more training in corrective exercise and physical therapy, and exercise.
Mhm.
I always want to go to a different place, and I have to remind myself to stay centered in my asana practice and keep the intention of what this practice is about. A lot of teachers, you go into the class and they will give their little spiel about what part of their day or what things they're bringing into the yoga class, and that can be great. For me, my practice is my practice, and my lifestyle is my lifestyle, and I don't think that having a lot of influence on other people's intention, unless you're setting a group intention for a class.
Mhm.
But also, like you were talking about, understanding what things connect with practice.
Mhm.
He's talking about the deities and learning the philosophies, and
Mhm.
it's
I
not
think
always appropriate to give a lecture about those things before practice or give too much information.
right,
But
because you don't want to
you know,
deter the clients from coming back. You don't want to scare
sure,
them off. Because if we
sure.
start, because most people don't realize that we have to do an opening prayer before the practice and a closing prayer.
Hmm.
And it's in Sanskrit, and people would be totally put off by that if we did it.
Sure.
They're trying to convert me. Like, no,
Right,
that's not what
right.
it's about. And so what I've had to do in the past personally is I'll do my opening prayer before anybody shows up, and then do my closing prayers after, or I'll sneak them in as music, but I try not to use music during asana practice.
Right, keeping true to tradition without
Mhm.
overloading people. I went to a class the other day, which the opening of the class had a really nice message to it, but
Mhm.
the teacher was reading definitions out of a textbook in front of the class, and it's a huge turnoff for everybody
Mhm.
in the room. You know what I mean?
Right. And then also while we're teaching, we also can incorporate the other aspects of philosophy while we're teaching, maybe focusing on one of the yamas or one of the niyamas as the focal point for the class and setting that intention. So
I
explaining ahimsa for one class or satya for another class.
Yeah, and I really do agree. I really do agree with that. Directing the flow and the language and the asanas towards a certain energetic or spiritual area will help, legitimize your class and help people connect with that energy, even if they don't know what's going on in that moment, or they don't, they may not understand why or what. But that's a good way to keep a traditional connection to a specific area in a class.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So next question, how can we as yoga teachers help make yoga accessible to everyone, not just the
Uh,
middle class?
sure. Always a problem since the creation of yoga. But there's the whole karma yoga idea. I mean, I'm fortunate to live in an area that to be able to offer things to people who wouldn't normally have access to it, and it's great. And you see people that never ever would are interested in doing yoga or would want to do an asana practice or have whatever fears or
Mhm.
stigma around openly having a spiritual practice with other people, joining in and see the effects on their life. I think that for myself, it's just important to be available, to not have any form of greed or too much ambition. Again, this gets mixed up with the fitness industry
Mhm.
thing about being in competition, yoga studios being in competition, and trying to hold on to a certain type of clientele with a certain skill level or get teachers that do things in a certain way. And it's about sharing the practice. It's
Mhm.
like any spirituality should be. It's about having open arms for anybody that wants to experience. A big part of that is always leading, being the example. If my yoga practice becomes more accessible to people if they're drawn to it because I'm living a certain yogic lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
that goes along with the practice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the same way you don't want to, you are not attracted to a personal trainer that's out of shape.
Right.
So
Right.
to be able to present the benefits of yoga to a wider audience of people through living
Living.
the practice,
Yeah.
then
Great.
the sparking interest is the first part of
Mhm.
of introducing a new practice to people.
Right. One thing that I keep bringing, that I've brought up a couple times for me personally, was to be meeting people where they're at. So we advertise or show off yogas and show off these really advanced postures for the physical practice, but we don't really appeal enough to the beginners, to people who have zero experience.
I agree. And
You know, and yoga studios, they will just let anybody come in, not to knock on yoga studios. Like, I get that you got to pay bills. I understand that. So we have to eat and feed our kids and clothe our kids. And I understand that. But at the same time, they'll take anybody in and they will let a beginner join an advanced class without even any experience, zero experience. And they open themselves up to liability that client is going to injure themselves. And then that client is either going to injure themselves or get completely deterred from coming back to yoga.
Right. Odds are they're not going to feel okay to come back, because there's all kind of judgment that goes along with this stuff. I can't do this. What they're doing, this is what yoga is. It's just not available to me.
Right. It's completely sort of degrading, if that makes sense. So and then you see it on a lot of the social media accounts. You see people who are very advanced in asana practice, and they're showing a lot of their physical postures as their main source of promoting their brand and their business. But what people don't realize is that's very off-putting to the beginner.
Yeah, people, they take one look at that and be like, well, I could never do that.
Yeah, I could never do that. Yeah. And so then they're like, then it becomes inobtainable.
Right.
And so one thing that I personally try to do is, if I'm putting a picture of me doing a certain posture, I try to do less pictures of me doing the physical and more of on the lifestyle aspect.
Very important. Yeah, because that's the part that is going to attract people. And when you how are you look happy, you look peaceful, how am I to obtain this? Well, I don't know, but the way that I did it is to follow these guidelines and begin with this practice. I think that also broadening the spectrum of methods that you're able to teach with opens up to a larger population too. You know, especially beginners or people's special populations, people with injuries or certain, hypertension, high blood pressure, bad backs, pregnancy, anything like that. Immediately their mind just goes to, that's not the activity for me, because a general practice may not be the activity for you. But there's ways that everybody, if you can't stand up, you can still do yoga. That's
right. And it's and also the emphasis, blindly putting emphasis all towards the physical aspect that's so prolific in this industry.
Right.
And so we can bring yoga to people without even them having to leave the comfort of their homes, or
without doing asana practice.
Right. If we're just having a conversation about meditation, we are teaching yoga.
Right.
Then this leads me to my last question. Has yoga changed your life, and in what way?
Profoundly, in almost every way that I can think of, right? I mean, first and foremost, I began yoga as a spiritual practice, or as a physical practice. Like I said, I had begun as a means of physical therapy to recover from a horrible accident where, I didn't have the use of my legs and one arm. And it's when I started to get any kind of mobility, the pain that I had just existing was unbearable. And somebody gifted me, a membership at a studio. And again, it was one of those, like we were talking about, I was really put off from going. I was in a wheelchair, And I was like, I can't do anything that they're going to do. And I literally, for the first couple months, was sitting there and only with my right arm doing it, every pose that I could do. But then it eventually came back, and since then, it's 10 years ago, and I've gained a level of health, physical health, and mobility and functionality that, what I was told was not available to me anymore. And so that's a huge gift. And through the blessings of that aspect, diving deeper into yoga, the key that I've learned in using my breath to calm my body and my emotions, the connection between the mind and the body, the spiritual, the ability to sit still and observe myself, are gifts from yoga. I didn't have the ability to effectively meditate before I began this practice. I have the ability to effectively step outside myself and view other people's perspectives, or how, the way I use my language and my movements and my thoughts affect other people. This general awareness that comes from a consistent practice has been a profound change in my life.
Yeah. I definitely hear from everybody who's not just a practitioner, but teacher trainings, how much of an impact people literally quit their entire careers just to become a yoga teacher, and wiped away their entire life and hit the reset button and said, yoga is my life now. And so it's changed. It changes everybody's life when you commit to it. So we want to share this experience with everybody. We want to shout it from rooftops,
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for today's Yoga Teacher Talks. If you like what you see, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. If you'd like to support what we're doing and join the conversation, go ahead and follow us on Instagram or Facebook. I'll leave the links in the video description. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Om Namah Shivaya.